Hello and welcome to the Valley. Today I am your host, Janet Michael. We are on the Zooms today with Ken Slack. You may remember he is the communication specialist for the Stanton District of VDOT. Ken and I are recording on a Tuesday afternoon, and he has graciously agreed to fill a slot that you are now listening to on Thursday afternoon because I had a last-minute guest bail. And so, Ken, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to do another snow show, the four-letter word
Yeah,
in your
the S
world.
word for VDOT, right.
We were talking a few minutes before we started recording about it is Tuesday that we're recording. People are listening on Thursday, and we still don't really know A, if we're going to get anything, or B, how much we're going to get, a lot, a little, what it's even going to look like. So I'm curious, how do you prepare for that? How far out before you actually know what it's going to be?
Interesting you mentioned the timing of that because I got a what we call a Teams message that goes out internally on Monday evening saying, "Oh, by the way, we're keeping an eye on this system that could give us some significant snow this coming weekend." And I believe it was within about 15 minutes of that I started getting messages from people outside VDOT. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? So and I think especially because it's been a while. I mean, we had quite a bit of activity in the first half of December. It's certainly been cold, but it hadn't been a whole lot in the way of winter weather. So everybody's geared up. And I do believe that by the time people are hearing this on Thursday, no one can say that they were surprised by this storm because even here as we talk on Tuesday, it seems to be all anybody's thinking about. So anyway, but really VDOT's response to the and preparation for these doesn't really change a ton, whether we're talking about it ends up being a six inch snow versus a 12-inch snow. Yeah, there is some difference, but we go very conservative in the sense that we plan for probably the heaviest end of the forecast because it's a whole lot easier and more efficient for us to scale back if we need to than it is to try to ramp up at the last minute. So the first thing that people will see will be the pre-treating that we do probably on Friday. You'll see the trucks out there on the interstate and a lot of the other major roadways putting those white stripes down. The brine lines, there's all kinds of nicknames for these things, but they are not a cure-all, not a panacea, but they do help buy some time for our crews to start spreading the regular salt and plowing, and they keep those early snows from making that really hard bond to the surface. In the past, you might remember some heavy snows where it's come down and cars have driven over it and it's melted and then refroze, and then it gets that hard pack. So that's really what the pre-treating tries to do, is to try to help prevent that hard pack. But we're gearing up for that and putting the word out to our contractors and hired equipment because VDOT cannot do this alone. But we are getting ready for it.
I think too, some of us here in the Shenandoah Valley think about how it impacts us in Woodstock, in Winchester, in Strasburg or Berryville, and we forget that the Stanton District of VDOT is not just us and our tiny little bubble that we consider to be the Shenandoah Valley. So it could be that Stanton is going to get 18 inches and Winchester is going to get 6. You've got to account for where it's gonna fall, how much, and when.
Yeah, absolutely. Our district, the Stanton district, covers 11 counties. So we've got all the way from Winchester and Berryville down to Natural Bridge and out west to Covington. So it includes about 150 miles of I-81. So we are a very linear district that generally follows the I-81 corridor. There very often is a big difference between what happens in the like our western mountains, like Highland County, Virginia, Switzerland, and Allegheny County up against the West Virginia lines versus what happens in Page County, Frederick County. But even though we cover 11 counties, we are divided into 3 different residencies, and they're in turn divided into area headquarters. And those are basically full of people who live in that county. They know where the cold spots are. They know there are particular areas that never get sunshine for a couple months out of the year. They're really good at planning where the resources need to be, whether it's, hey, we need to hit this road first, or whether we need to do salting here versus plowing, and all those kinds of little details that come in by the thousands when you have a decent sized storm like this.
And there really is a science behind it. You guys don't just say, "Hey, we're gonna salt everything," or "We're gonna do gravel in this spot because we think that's cheaper." You put things down where you think they'll be the most effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about pre treating earlier, and sometimes people ask us questions about why didn't you pre treat? It is a science. And I use that as an example because that one's a little bit easier for me, a communications guy, to explain. We have finite resources that you and I are paying for. And we want to make sure that if we're going to make the decision to do the pre treating, that it actually is going to be effective. So if we're looking at a snowstorm, it seems like so many times we have these storms that come in as rain during the afternoon or something like that, and then they switch over to freezing rain or sleet or snow. If we're looking at a significant portion of rain before we get that winter transition, that just washes the pre-treating off the roadways and we've wasted those resources. This particular storm doesn't look like that's going to be a problem. We're looking at some cold temperatures, so we believe as of Tuesday that we're looking at 100% snow. So it makes sense for us to do the pre-treating. Plus, you got to time it right. You want to have it finished, everything's out there on the road and dry before the snow comes, but you don't want to do it too early because over time, the traffic will wear that stuff off. So there's all kinds of decisions we have to make, and science is a big part of the decision making process.
You have to do this dance of sorts to make sure all of those things are being done in a certain order, in a certain way, at a certain time. And then there are those of us that just think it's all so easy. Well, why didn't they do this? Thankfully, now I think a lot of people, though, understand the reason that you don't put the brine down is because it may start as rain. I think a lot of us have caught on to that. And now we understand that's why we don't see the snow lines on the road.
Yeah, and I think folks have, over the past several years, have come to expect that they will see the brine lines, the pre-treating out there. That's something that VDOT started doing after I started here almost 13 years ago. Started out as a pilot program and it's been effective. And so it's gone pretty much statewide. And very quickly, folks began expecting to see that. So we sometimes have to explain why we didn't. And so that's why I chose that example. But that's just one. And let's face it, we sometimes get questions about which roads we plow first or why sometimes you see a truck go by and it doesn't even have its plow down. Well, they may be on their way to the route that they plow, or maybe they're putting salt down, but they're not plowing. So there's all kinds of decisions that we have to make. The type of precipitation makes a big difference. The air temperature, ground temperature, all those things go into our decision making. But we're not going to be getting caught flat footed. We're going to get out there as quick as we can and using all of the resources at our disposal. VDOT employees and VDOT equipment is never enough for a widespread storm. So we start way back in the spring and summer reaching out to our contractors and hired equipment to get them signed on for the snow season and make sure that we've got the help out there to get this job done.
You said something during our official snow show back in early December about the trucks on 81 in particular, and that they are assigned a certain mile marker from this mile marker to that mile marker. When you just said that sometimes they may not have their snow plows down, that they are responsible for north and south lanes in that area. I did not realize that that was how it was divvied up. So that was really interesting. I just thought they started in a spot and they just kept going until they
Till
saw
they
another
till they
plow and
run
they
out of
turned around and come
gas or
back the other
what?
way.
Or till they run out of diesel, I should say. But yeah, the VDOT and contractors that work the interstate, for example, have a certain section that they plow. I'm sure you've heard VDOT tell you from time to time, we focus on the primary roads first, interstates first, primary roads. And once the storm tapers off and we've got those in good shape, then that's when we get to the secondaries and then the subdivisions and side streets. There are times when, and this may very well be one of those times where we've got heavy snow for hours at a time, we may not get off the interstate. To pick one small example, you might have a plow that's responsible for hitting, say, I 66 between the 81 junction and the Linden exit at 13. And so they may be just going back and forth between that 13-mile stretch, eastbound, westbound, left lane, right lane. By the time they do that whole circuit, an hour's probably passed. And guess what? If it's snowing an inch an hour or quite often more, they're going to be doing it again and again and again for pretty much their entire 12-hour shift. That's tough work. And I'm glad I'm a communications guy that does not have a CDL because I'm not going to get tapped on the shoulder to do that. But until the snow starts to taper off and they feel like they can safely get away from the interstates and start working on the other roadways, folks are not going to see them in the subdivisions.
Was it you that told me that the San Francisco Bridge is in a constant state of being painted because by the time they get one side of it painted, it's time to work their way back the other. Because that sounds a lot like what happens on 81 when we're getting an inch of snow an hour. It's just a perpetual plowing motion.
I don't think that was me, but I can understand the analogy. And certainly when we have a really high level storm, we're going to have on the order of up to 900 trucks throughout our district, not in any particular county. So we get lots of help, and they're not just plowing one little section of the interstate at a time. But I'm just trying to help folks understand that when we have a serious storm like this, it might take us some time to get to my street, as people like to say. They never plow my street. We will get to you. There are times when, hey, there's a miscommunication. Pick up the phone, let us know. I don't usually have to tell folks that because they're going to pick up the phone. But make sure you give VDOT and its contract partners plenty of time. We will get to you.
Let's take a break on that note. Let's take a break. And when we come back, let's talk about what's considered a primary road. And VDOT doesn't do all subdivisions. There's a mechanism in place for what it is that you do versus what, say, the city of Winchester is responsible for or the town of Middletown is responsible for. Can you break that down for me in the next segment?
I'll do my best.
We are on the Zooms today with Ken Slack. He is the communication specialist for the Stanton District of VDOT. He is filling in for a last minute snow show. This is technically going to be a two-part show because you're going to get to hear him again on Monday when we talk about actual road projects, which is when his regular show is scheduled to air. But we're going to come back and talk more about snow prep in just a couple of minutes.
This Saturday, Henry Mueller will change the world. He has no idea that's what he's going to do. He only knows that he went to justserve.org and signed up to spend time at a senior center Saturday morning. As he browsed through service opportunities in his own community, he remembered the words of Paul to the Galatians, "By love, serve one another." Little does Henry know that Saturday morning he'll end up speaking to one senior in particular who hasn't seen his family in several weeks and is feeling especially lonely. Henry doesn't know the short time he'll spend with this man will lift his spirits, cheer his heart, and make his life just a little better. Through love and service this Saturday, Henry Mueller will change the world. See the difference you can make. Sign up for service opportunities in your community. Visit justserve.org.
Welcome back to the Valley today. I am your host, Janet Michael. We are on the Zooms today with Ken Slack. Ken is the communications specialist for the Stanton District of VDOT. And so I conned Ken into recording this little extra show before we record his real show that you'll get to hear on Monday. Because, Ken, what did I tell you my logic was? Much like getting the snow shovel out of the shed, that if we record a show that airs on Thursday talking about snow, then likely we won't get any. And that's what I'm aiming for. I'm hoping for no snow at all.
And that's the only reason I agreed to this, is I'm hoping that your theory proves accurate. So.
When we went to break, you were talking about the hierarchy of sorts of what gets plowed in what order and when. And it makes complete and total sense that the interstates, 81, 66, all of those get done first because the commerce, first of all, has to get through. You have to be able to get people to a hospital, to all of these things. And typically those are the routes that they're doing. But then you move to primary roads. When I hear primary road, I think Route 11, I think some of the Pleasant Valley Avenue in Winchester, some of those kinds of things. How are primary roads designated?
Primary roads, pretty simple designation for us. If the number is lower than 600, that's a primary road. And it's everything from, you mentioned 11, Route 50, 17, 522, 37 around Winchester, roads like that. If it's a smaller number than 600, that's a primary road. The secondaries are 600 and higher. Route 600 in Frederick County or Route 638 in Rockland area. And if I got the number wrong, people in Rockland will not forgive me for that. But 6, 7, 800. And then you get into some of the subdivisions where you might have like a 4-digit number or things like that. But basically 600 is the breakoff.
And then it also depends on the size of the locality that I live in, whether or not you're responsible for plowing my street.
For the most part, yes. Independent cities like Winchester, they do all of the maintenance on all of their roadways, with the sole exception of, and I believe 81 in Winchester actually is just to the east of the city limits. But in any case, all the roadways in the city limits of Winchester, the city handles. Towns are a bit of a different story, actually, different levels of town status above 3,500, below 3,500. And the towns can actually apply to have VDOT do more or less maintenance or choose to do more of their own. But for the most part, in towns, we do the primary roads and they take care of the secondary roads and the side streets and subdivisions, stuff like that, for the most part.
And I think sometimes we don't realize that as residents of a particular subdivision, or I don't live in a subdivision. I am in Middletown proper, but it would never occur to me that I wouldn't think of necessarily of VDOT being the one that has to come and clear my street. I would assume that my town would do it, but a lot of times it is VDOT. And that's why it may take an extra couple of hours or even another day, because you are out clearing 81 and 37 and 608 and all of those places.
Statewide, we have, I think it's 58,000 miles worth of roads. I don't remember what the number is for our district alone, but we have some localities in our 11 county district that have over 2,000 miles worth of roadways. We can't be everywhere at once, and so we have to have hierarchy. It's the interstates, the primary roads, but also some of those key secondary roads, like where you might have fire departments and hospitals and key infrastructure like that. As you said, we've got to keep the major roadways open, not just for commerce, but so that emergency responders can get where they need to go. And obviously, our own plows can get where they need to go.
Many of us forget that all of our streets originated with a number. So when you're talking about making sure that roads to a hospital, for example, are clear, Winchester Medical Center is on Amherst Street, but it has a number. We all call it Amherst Street because that's what the name
That's
is on
50.
the signs, but it does actually have a number assigned to it.
Yeah, I live down in Augusta County, and our subdivisions, the street that we're on, I doubt anybody in our subdivision would know the number, but because I'm a VDOT nerd, I can tell you it's 1510. But nobody calls it that. But that's how VDOT has its spreadsheet of roads that it maintains. The road names actually come from the localities, not from VDOT.
So once the drivers are done on the interstate and the primary roads and they make their way into the subdivisions, are there things that we as residents should be doing or could do to make it easier for them? Like, for example, not parking our cars out
Yeah.
on the street. Are there things that these poor guys think, man, if only these people would stop doing this, I could do this a lot faster and a lot more efficiently?
Yeah, and that actually is one of them, Janet. One of the reasons that we do ask people to postpone travel if they can, not being out there during the storm, because then our plows are having to navigate around other vehicles, or vehicles are having to navigate around slow moving plows. But if somebody does slide off and gets stuck in a ditch or up against a guardrail, there's not a whole lot we can do except go around them. And that creates a spot that's difficult to access. We're talking about subdivisions and things like that. If people can park off street, that certainly helps if they can. I realize not everybody can. And if one of the things that we hear a lot is, I just shoveled out my driveway and then the truck came through and plowed it back in.
I wasn't going to bring
There's
that
no
up, but I
way.
have been
I
that person before.
know. We might
I
as
like
well
you too
just,
much to bring
it's
that
one of
up.
those elephants in the room. Because sometimes people say, why can't they just lift the plow? Well, yours is not the only not the only driveway on that road. If we're lifting plows every time we get to a driveway, we're going to have nothing but that. But we can tell folks that if you're shoveling and you're facing the roadway, toss the snow to your right. That way there's a little bit less on that side of the driveway if the plow comes in after you shovel. Might make a little bit of difference. And if you can wait till the plow comes through, then even better. But the driver is not out to get you. He's not sitting in the truck laughing as he goes by. He's got many, many miles of roads to plow. These men and women have thankless jobs for 12 hours a day, around the clock. On a significant storm like this, it could be for days at a time, plowing day and night and trying to navigate around vehicles and mailboxes and inoperable
Fire
vehicles
hydrants. We have a
sometimes.
fire
Yeah.
hydrant down on the
Yeah.
corner of our street, and it has one of those little flag things
So,
on
yeah.
top of it. I'm guessing to let the plow truck know, hey, there's something under here that you probably don't want to hit.
Yeah. That would be ugly.
So this storm, in theory, isn't going to come through until Saturday afternoon, I think is what they're projecting for it to start. But we have had storms that have come through on Friday afternoon. Friday is our trash day. So it's highly likely that in some cases, people are putting their trash to the curb. The trash guys come, they pick up the trash, the can is still there. Trying to get those kinds of things back up to the house before a storm comes is also beneficial so that they're not being smashed into by a plow truck in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, whatever folks can do to keep the roadways clear, whether it's vehicles or whatever it may be, that's your best bet. And give us a chance to do our jobs, for our contract partners to do their jobs. They all have a certain section of roads that they are plowing, which brings up another point. Sometimes we hear from folks saying, hey, there was a tractor, some person on a tractor that was clearing our subdivision street and the cul-de-sac. I guess they got tired of waiting for VDOT to come out there and do it. And so they just did it themselves. Well, quite often we're probably writing that person a check. There are certain kinds of roadways where tractors or other types of trucks with plows, just because you don't see VDOT on the side of that truck or tractor doesn't mean that they're not part of the state's snow removal effort. They may very well be.
And we see that a lot. I've seen that in previous snowstorms where it's local companies that I know clear parking lots for businesses or that sort of stuff, but they're also out doing some of these subdivisions because they, again, have been contracted by VDOT because they already have the equipment, they already have the experience,
Mhm.
and it just makes it easier for you to not have to find people to fill those slots.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way that we could have the number of people and number of pieces of equipment required to deal with a major snowstorm and have them on the payroll year round, because we wouldn't have enough for them to do and it would be very expensive. But when we need these emergency operators, we have the mechanism in place to say, hey, we're at a whatever level storm that triggers the people that we call in. And that changes from county to county, storm to storm, as we talked about earlier. We've got to be very nimble about how we use our resources. Don't want to put too much out there, but definitely don't want to mobilize too little either. That's back to science, aren't we?
When we're talking about these people that are driving these vehicles, they are working what, 12-hour shifts, I would assume, at least an 8-hour shift. It gets a little tiring. I always have tried. We used to live in a years and years ago. We used to live in a subdivision in Winchester off of Route 50. And so when the snowplows would come, usually at night, because they took all day to do all the other things, I would always try to take them out a cup of coffee or a bottle of water or here's some cookies or brownies that I made. Thank you, thank you, thank you for clearing my street. Are we allowed technically to do that, or should we not be doing that kind of thing?
I'm not really sure if I'm allowed to answer that question. The,
You don't
the,
want a
the
bunch of
first part of
drivers
what you
mad
said,
because
yeah.
they like the
Well,
cookies and the
yeah.
coffee.
No,
If
and it
it's
does
safe.
happen from time to time. And our 12-hour shift is pretty standard. It depends on what part of the district you're in. Some of our areas go midnight to noon into midnight, and others use 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. as the start and end of their shift. But yeah, for the most part, when the crew member comes in, they start a 12-hour shift, and that truck, it's almost like police officers in a way. That car may not even be turned off. Same thing with the VDOT trucks. It's just the driver who changes. They come back and refill with salt and do all of the pre-operation checks, and they're back out there. But yes, we have had times where folks wave their arms and are offering coffee or donuts or whatever, and I'm sure the drivers appreciate that. I probably shouldn't encourage that though, because I don't want people running out into the roadways in front of our
There
trucks.
is that.
But I
It's
will. I
true.
do remember a story that one of our drivers told me, that he actually had somebody that, because they have people that yell at them, shake their fists, and other appendages at them if they feel like they're getting their driveways plowed in or whatever. They've even had snow shovels thrown at their trucks and things like that. But there was a time when one of our drivers said he had somebody that was running down the driveway toward him, and they had a snow shovel in their hand. And he said, "Oh boy, here it comes." But it turns out they were trying to catch up with him to give him, they had a little bag of donuts that they gave. So sometimes people surprise you with their niceness. So that,
I want to
but
live in a world where there are more of those people. That's where I want to
yeah,
live.
that guy probably signed up to keep doing that subdivision, I'm sure. So
That's awesome. So before we wrap up, do you want to make a guess for what you think we're going to get? And then we'll see whether it shakes out.
I absolutely do not.
I knew that was going to be
I
your
it
answer.
does look like we're going to get something. And folks certainly have had opportunity over the past couple of days, even though you're not hearing this till Thursday. If you've got a chance to get some of your errands done, I know sometimes people make a run on the stores, but if you have an opportunity to change your plans so that you're not having to travel in the middle of this, that's one of our best pieces of advice. Be flexible with your travel plans so that if it's at all possible, do what you need to do before the storm so that you can take a couple of days off and let this thing finish up and give us a chance to do our jobs and make the road safe for you.
You'll be happy to know I went out Monday night and got my Oreos. So I am perfectly settled in and ready to go for whatever ends up falling from the sky. I am prepared. Thank you for doing an extra show to talk about the snow with me today. I appreciate it.
Hopefully your prediction comes through. We've talked about it, so it won't happen.
And then I'm going to get a bunch of emails from people that love snow and are very annoyed with me because I'm the one that kept it away. And I can live with that too. That's fine.
Wouldn't bother me at all.
I will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of The Valley. Today we're talking with Corporal Sloan, who is the officer that you may see walking up and down the Old Town Winchester Walking Mall. He is talking a little bit about safety with Brady Cloven tomorrow. So meet me back here for that just a few minutes after noon.